You are watching Forbidden Knowledge TV.
The state of ufology today in the 21st century is rather complexing. The problems that we have is that we have a lot of fake news, usually through the internet, as well as media, newspapers, those sort of things. We also have fanciful stories with very little evidence, and this really does muddy the waters. Of course, in some investigations were carried out very well throughout the 1940s, some actually even better than actually carried out today. What's most interesting is that at one time investigators thought the evidence lies within photographs and video footage, but now it seems to be just another stone added to the mountain we've already got. However, probably the most significant are those incidents that recorded and photographed UFOs from the 1940s onwards, long before the signs of any internet, any software, manipulation software for photographs or videos, and long before people had the idea of actually fake news and such fanciful stories. Nevertheless, I still believe some of these earlier pieces of video footage really do show some authentic phenomena. Take for instance the Battle of LA that took place on February 28, 1942, yes, during the heightened part of the Second World War over Los Angeles. What's interesting is that there were a huge amount of information in regarding this particular incident. What actually unfolded that night is a little bit unknown still, because there are differing pieces of information which you go backwards and forwards as to what this object could have been. The story unfolds such as 2 balloons were actually launched from San Francisco. It is proven and tracked on radar. These were allegedly already taken down. Everybody was a bit jittery around about that time. It was only the night before the Japanese had already conducted an attack on LA from submarines. But what actually happened was an object was tracked on radar by the military. And of course it travelled over towards Los Angeles, causing quite a stir, enough to think that it was actually Japanese bombers. In fact, some people actually reported seeing Japanese bombers, even though we now know that Japan didn't actually send any over at that time. No aircraft over Los Angeles. So what was this mystery object? Other people reported seeing a bunch of balloons, or one large balloon as a weather balloon.
Anti-aircraft guns went into action against unidentified aircraft in the Los Angeles area shortly after 3 a.m. Pacific wartime this morning. The anti-aircraft guns began barking during a blackout ordered by the 4th Interceptor Command at 2:25 a.m. The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach. Army officials declined to comment on the possibility that the object might have been a blimp. However, it required nearly 30 minutes to travel some 25 miles, far slower than an airplane. Watchers on the rooftop of the Columbia Broadcasting Building in the heart of Hollywood could plainly see the flashes of guns and searchlights sweeping the skies in a white arc along the coastal area. Concussion of the shells could be felt in downtown Los Angeles, 15 miles away. U.S. Army planes quickly took to the dark sky, but whether they contacted the object has not been announced. Army officials say they will not comment until they receive a full report of the action.
There are numerous different stories out there. However, what actually unfolded was that the military bombarded a barrage of the anti-aircraft artillery on this particular object. It was flooded by searchlights for over an hour. What's fascinating is that there were some reports to suggest that they made several direct impacts on this object. Not one of them seemingly brought it down or even damaged it. It didn't even sway it from its course. It just trajected through the sky until it disappeared. We don't know what it was. There was no answer to it. Interestingly, a number of people were injured, and that was basically from the falling shrapnel, from the debris. But we don't actually know what the object was. Surely if it was a weather balloon, just one at least of these anti-aircraft projectiles would have damaged it, bringing down that balloon. But that actually wasn't the case. So you can understand there was a bit of a disagreement between the army here, which said no way was that a weather balloon, and the military air force saying it must have been an air balloon. There's a number of photographs that have been taken of that incident. One which shows the UFO. It's a very famous photograph. Most people will recognize it. However, there are a number of other photographs taken that night as well, which didn't show anything unusual in the sky. There was only the one particular photograph that showed anything. And of course, all we were left with the following day was news stories. People reporting that the shrapnel had hit their homes, had buried itself in their pavements outside their homes, and stories like this. Of course, it was a hell of a stir. People were very upset. And in this particular case, we're left with no answers. Was it a plane? Was it a balloon? Was it something else? The mystery remains. Said to be one of the very first pieces of UFO footage ever filmed is the Montana Great Falls footage from 1950. Let's just take a look at this video. On August the 15th, 1950, in Great Falls, Montana, around about 11:25 a.m., two unusual objects were sighted and recorded. Noting that the wind was only 25 to 28 miles per hour and only reaching 37 miles per hour by 12:30 p.m, the objects were seemingly moving against the wind, which rules out the possibility of any balloons. The whole case was investigated by the United States Air Force, and they released their conclusion stating that it was the sun's reflection of two F-94 aircraft in the area. The footage was recorded by Nick Mariana. He went on to describe the objects as bright and silvery, rotating while flying over the Great Falls at speed. He estimated them to be 200 to 400 miles per hour. He believed that they were roughly 50 feet wide and about 150 feet apart. This was filmed on a 16mm movie camera for about 60 seconds, and as you can see in the footage, you can clearly see these two objects in flight. What is interesting is that Nick Mariana stated that he first went out and saw these objects. They were moving across the sky. Then they actually stopped, completely stopped. At that point, he rushed off to the car to grab his camera and start filming them. Just as he pressed record on the camera, these objects were moving. And unfortunately, we didn't see them in the stationary position. But he did describe that when looking at them, he reckoned that they were actually disc-shaped. Also, what's also to take into consideration is that at that time, Nick was reforming the minor league baseball team. And this couldn't have really come at a better time, to be honest with you, because Nick went on to show his video of these objects at different events and different places, tied in to publicising the minor league baseball team. So it kind of helped out for him in a way. What is interesting is that the footage has really never been explained. One thing is for sure, it doesn't seem to be two F-94 aircraft. As you can see what an F-94 aircraft is like. And these don't look nothing like them. What Nick actually said was that sometime later after filming these two objects, two F-94s did actually cross over in that location. Maybe in pursuit of these objects, who knows? But unfortunately, the United States Air Force concluded on Nick's video that they were reflections off the side of the F-94 fighters as they flew over. And of course, they were flying reasonably slow if that was the case. And under analysis, under enhancement, you don't see no wings, no tails. These simply are not F-94s. Nick Mariana had this to say about the incident.
As I looked up, I saw two silvery objects moving swiftly out of the northwest. They appeared to be moving directly south. The objects were very bright and about 10,000 feet in the air. They appeared to be of a bright, shiny metal, like polished silver. Both were the same size and were traveling at the same rate of speed, which was much slower than the jets which shot by shortly after I filmed the discs. Suddenly, they stopped. It was then I remembered the camera in the glove compartment of my car. I raced downstairs, yelling for my secretary, Miss Virginia Ronick. The distance from the top of the stairway to my car is about 60 feet, and I must have made that in about 6 jumps. I asked my secretary if she saw anything, and she said yes, 2 silvery spheres. I unlocked the glove compartment of my car, took out the camera, turned the telephoto lens on the turret into position, set the camera at f/22, picked up the objects in the viewfinder, and pressed the trigger. The discs appeared to be spinning like a top and were about 50 feet across and about 50 yards apart. I could not see any exhaust, wings, or any kind of fuselage. There was no cabin, no odor, no sound, except I thought I heard a whooshing sound when I first saw them. As the film clicked through the camera, I could see the objects moving southeast behind the General Mills grain building and the black water tank directly south of the ballpark. I filmed the objects until they disappeared into the blue sky behind the water tank.
But it wasn't the last time these things were going to show up. Only 2 years later in Utah, these things were seen and recorded again on 16mm film. On July 2nd, 1952, Delbert Newhouse also caught something strange on his 16mm camera, which was also to back up the incident from Montana 1950, as he seemingly not only recorded the same type of phenomena, but multiple of these objects. Let's take a look at the film.
About 7 miles after we passed through Claremont in Utah, my wife noticed a group of objects in the sky that she could not identify. I pulled over to the side of the road, stopped, got out, looked up and saw the objects.
Navy warrant officer Delbert Newhouse, who filmed the formation of bright objects over the town in Utah, said that a number of people had studied his film for a number of months. And an organisation had also stated in January 1993 that they had concluded what these objects represented. It was in fact the sponsored CIA Robertson Panel, and they concluded that these were nothing more than birds in flight. We are aware that birds do have reflective underbellies, certainly like seagulls and birds like that. And they can seem to reflect light from the ground, even street lighting in some cases. On a sunny day, they can be seen to be white dots in the sky, especially when at high altitude. Most of the time they're flying in formation. However, what we're actually seeing in Delbert Newhouse's film is something that I would not consider to be birds. They seem to be self-emitting light, like we've seen before, these UFO orbs or balls of light. Whatever they represent is very similar to the Montana 1950 footage that was taken only 2 years earlier. Now, we continue to have these sightings regularly around the world, especially in Mexico City. But it seems to me that whatever Delbert Newhouse recorded was more or less the same thing, except for the fact that there were more of them in the sky. And of course, they didn't seem to move like birds neither. I think, as far as it comes down to the CIA's sponsored Robertson Panel's conclusion was that it was an inaccurate one, or one that was just to dismiss the incident. Nevertheless, though, I wasn't satisfied with that conclusion, and I'm sure a lot of other investigators out there might not be.
You are watching Forbidden Knowledge TV.